Let's take a look at another basic earnings per share question. Fry's Corporation had 2020 net income of $1.4 million. During 2020, Fry's paid a dividend of $5 per share on 100,000 preferred shares. Fry's also had 220,000 common shares outstanding during the year. Calculate Fry's 2020 earnings per share, round to the nearest cent. Okay, so we are going to calculate the earnings per share. So what's the income available to common shareholders? Well, we know that the net income was 1.4 million. But we know that it says we paid a dividend of $5 per share on 100,000 preferred shares. So we're going to need to subtract $500,000. And this is a $5 dividend times 100,000 preferred shares that we paid. And we're going to divide this by the weighted average number of shares outstanding, which it looks like was simply 220,000 shares for the year. So this is going to give us $4.09 per share. That's our basic EPS. Part 2, assume the same information except that the preferred shares are non-cumulative and the dividend has not been declared or paid. Well, if the shares are not cumulative and the dividend hasn't been declared or paid, then we actually don't need to subtract off the 500,000 for the preferred share dividend. So our earnings per share would simply be 1.4 million divided by 220,000, which will give us $6.36 per share, per common share. Assume the same information except that the preferred shares are cumulative and the dividend has not been declared or paid. Calculate Fry's 2020 earnings per share. Well, interestingly enough, even though in scenario 1 the dividend was paid and in part 3 we're told the dividend hasn't been declared or paid, the calculation is exactly the same. So we've got the net income. We're still going to subtract off the 500,000 for the preferred shareholders, even though it hasn't been declared or paid. If the shares are cumulative, it has to be taken off because we can't distribute anything to the common shareholders until we make good on that cumulative dividend for the preferred shareholders. Divide this by the 220,000 common shares outstanding for the year, and that is going to give us $4.09 per share. Of course, the same answer as in part 1.